Welcome to round one of the Donaldson Cross Country Championship, the RFS Endurance. More than 40 national competitors, nearly 700 kilometers of racing, 2 different categories of cars, and plenty of drama along the way. This is cross-country racing at its finest, and here are the details of what turned out to be a spectacular event. It was a long, dry spell as far as the Donaldson Championship is concerned, but after months of preparation, it was finally time to go racing again, and on April Fool's Day 2016, we were back in action. The setting was the northwest town of Vryburg, around 400 kilometers to the west of Johannesburg. This area is known as the home of cross-country racing in South Africa, and as such, was a fitting place to kick off the 2016 season. Round one of the championship was the RFS Endurance, sponsored by Retirement Fund Solutions, who also fielded their spectacular Volkswagen Amarok in the race. The endurance part of the name refers to the race distance, and round one had a total of nearly 700 kilometers of racing. But before we get to the race itself, let's take a look at the key players. The addition of the new FIA class within the production vehicle category was meant to allow South African Dakar competitors, such as the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA team, to not only compete locally, but also test their vehicles in preparation for the Dakar. But beyond that, it also opened the door for international competitors to come and take part in the local series, using vehicles that conform to the FIA's rules. With that in mind, the local crews were joined by 2 crews from Brazil for round one, adding some well-needed international flavor to the RFS Endurance. Brothers Christian and Marcus Baumgart, partnered by Becco Neto and Kleber Cincia respectively, campaigned 2 very easy to spot bright yellow Ford Rangers in Vryburg, and were very excited about the event before the start.
It's our first race. We expect to learn a little bit more about the terrain. It's unknown conditions, unknown terrain. I think it's going to be a rough race, but certainly a very fun race for sure.
At the same time, all eyes were on defending South African champions Leroy Poulter and Rob Howie in the Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux. The pair finished 5th overall on this year's Dakar Rally, driving the exact same vehicle they'd be fielding in Vryburg.
Start of a new year, we're very happy to be back with a new Hilux after we've come back from Dakar with it. This year with the rules change, we can run it in the FIA class, a new class that's formed now in South Africa. We're quite happy to do that. I'm more used to the car, and I think it definitely benefits us definitely going forward to Dakar for development and testing.
Top of the privateers in last year's championship was Jason Fenter and Vince van Alleman in their 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. And even though the pair were early favourites to perform well in Class T, they'd be facing stiff competition in 2016. The RFS Volkswagen Amarok crew of Christian Deploy and Henk Janssen van Vuren can be blisteringly quick, but they haven't had much time with the Amarok, due mainly to teething problems with the new vehicle. At the same time, former Ford driver Gary Berthold has joined the fray in the Atlas Copco Volkswagen Amarok and was partnered by new navigator Pierre Aries for the first round. So the Class T battle was shaping up to be a bloody one, and that's before bringing the ultra-consistent Johan van Staden and navigator Mike Lawrenson in their Nissan Navara into account. And then there was a celebrity for the race. TV personality Marius Roberts joined Terence Marsh in the red-lined Nissan Navara for a 4th outing. In the special vehicle category, it was Evan Hutchison and navigator Donnie Stassen in the Motorrad Bats who would enjoy the most scrutiny. The pair romped to the championship title with 1 round to spare in 2015, but 2016 promised new challenges. With former champions Quinton Sorwald and navigator Cully Sorwald joining Hutchison at Motorrad Racing, the defending champions would have to watch their backs. A more immediate threat was more likely to come from Cyril van Biljoen and Philip Herselman in their Atlas Copco Bat. So those are some of the key players to keep an eye on. The backdrop for the RFS Endurance was the dry brush and scrub to the northeast of Vryburg, with the race loop encircling the town of Stella. The designated service park, or DSP, was again based at the Vryburg Motor Club and was a hive of frantic activity, not only for the crews, but also for the families and friends that always turn out in support. Remember, the Donaldson Championship features a family-friendly environment and access to all areas remain free of charge, just as it was in Vryburg. Join us after the break for details of the battle amongst the production vehicles and after that, the special vehicles. Welcome back to the Donaldson Championship RFS Endurance in Vryburg, round 1 of the 2016 championship. In the production vehicle category, the qualifying race got underway at exactly 10:30 on the morning of April the 1st. And after a draw to determine starting orders, it was Leroy Poulter and Rob Howie who opened the course. The pair got off to a flying start despite having to pick their way through the tricky terrain. And by the time they reached the 20-kilometer marker, they were holding onto the gap over their teammates. Speaking of teammates, it was Anthony Taylor and Dennis Murphy who started second, with Berthold in the Amarok starting in third. The Amarok crew seemed slightly tentative at first, but by the time they crossed the pan nearly 100 kilometers into the qualifying race, it was clear that something was wrong. The pair had a flat tire about 30 kilometers into the loop and damaged an intercom wire when they got out to do the tire change. They finished the qualifying loop more than 12 minutes down on the eventual winners. Johan and Werner Horn in the Malalon Toyota Hilux went off fourth for the qualifying race and clearly had the bit between their teeth when they screamed past the camera at the 20-kilometer mark, but it didn't last. The Hilux crew suffered 2 punches and dropped down to 16th place in the qualifying standings by the time they reached DSP. Chris Visser, partnered this year with Ward Huxtable in the NWM Ford Ranger, went off next, followed by locals Malcolm Koch and Johan Berger in their Toyota Hilux. Christian Deploy, Gareth Woolridge and the 2 Brazilian competitors completed the first group of production vehicles for the start of the qualifying race. In the end, however, it was the 2 FIA spec factory Toyotas that dominated the session, with Poulter and Howie drawing first blood, despite having to open the road.
Today really went well, the first prologue of the year. The Hilux definitely showed it suited this type of terrain. And Rob and I really worked well together. I'd like to stay in front and hopefully the dust can keep Anthony further back, but Anthony was right behind us. I know he's going to give us a hard time, and there's a couple of other cars that will be quick as well.
Taylor and Murphy completed the qualifier just 1 minute 17 behind Poulter. But the biggest surprise of the day was the pace shown by Deploy in the RFS Volkswagen Amarok. He posted the 3rd fastest qualifying time, 2 minutes 16 slower than Poulter. It was a stunning performance by the Pretoria crew, and one that was sure to make the RFS lads very happy indeed. Johan van Staden also had a good run together with Mike Lawrenson in the red-lined Nissan Navara. By the time they neared the end of the loop and at the 187-kilometer mark, it was clear their performance was spectacular, good enough for 4th on the day, and they'd start only 16 seconds behind the Amarok of Deploy. And then there was Jason Venter and Vince van Alleman in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. The pair had a clean run during qualifying, finishing 5th fastest, less than 4 minutes behind the leaders. Sadly, Dion Venter and Jacco van Aert suffered an engine failure in their 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux and were forced to retire from the weekend's racing. Some other notable performances included Gareth Woolridge, who had a small overshoot near the 100-kilometer marker on his qualifying race. He turned around only to collide with Malcolm Koch in his Hilux. The damage was slight, but when Woolridge had to change a tyre shortly afterwards, he found that the jack point had been damaged in the collision, and he lost nearly 9 minutes as a result. But spare a thought for the red-lined crew of Luke Buerta and Andre Vermeulen, who also had a tyre change during their qualifying race. Unlike Woolridge, the jacking point on their Nissan Navara was fine, but the pair had lost the jack off the back of their vehicle earlier in the loop and lost a massive time as a result. Things were looking up for Marius Roberts, who was navigating for Terence Marsh as a celebrity on the RFS Endurance. The pair qualified well in their red-lined motorsport Nissan Navara, just behind the 2 Brazilian Ford crews, who were clearly enjoying themselves. best of the very small Class S field was Otto Greven and Bobby Bruin in their Greven Motorsport Toyota Hilux. They were only 10 minutes behind Poulter at the start, and things were looking good for the main race. With the qualifying race behind them, the service crews had a chance to repair what needed to be repaired and get ready for the main race. April the 2nd dawned clear and surprisingly chilly considering the heat that was to follow later in the day. The flag dropped at 7:30 sharp, so the crews lined up in the starting chute from very early in the morning. The atmosphere was tense, with the two 245-kilometer loops ahead, and then almost suddenly, it was time to go. Poulter and Howie flew out the blocks and made it look easy all day. Their Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux never missed a beat, and the pair led comfortably from start to finish. If anything, theirs was an absolutely clinical performance, matched only by that of their teammates Taylor and Murphy. The Toyota pairings totally dominated the race, with Poulter finishing some 3 minutes 17 ahead of Taylor. Deploy, who started the race just over 2 minutes behind the leaders in their RFS Volkswagen Amarok, initially looked strong. When he passed the camera at the 295-kilometer mark, the Amarok seemed right on the pace of the Toyotas, and it was clear that Deploy might offer the only resistance to the Toyota dominance. But it wasn't to be. Call it the curse of the sponsors if you like, but after 90 kilometers into the second loop, it was game over for the bright orange machine.
No, it was about 90 k's in, just around the corner, and we just lost all drive. So, yeah, end of the race for us. It was fun. We had a clean run, never got out of the car except for now, and yeah, unfortunately it happened.
This meant that 4x4 Mega World's Jason Fenter inherited third place. He had a clean run and brought the Toyota Hilux home in third overall and first in Class T, clearly showing that he has the pace to take the fight to anyone in the field. Johan van Staden in the red-lined Motorsport Nissan Navara dropped down to fourth in the overall standings despite an excellent race, with Chris Visser and Ward Huxtable in the NWM Ford Ranger rounding out the top 5. But beyond the 5 of them, a number of other crews made their mark on the RFS Endurance this year. Berthold and Aries, for instance, may have done significantly better were it not for their woes during the qualifying race. These continued in the main race as they experienced several punches before getting stuck in the dust of slower competitors. As navigator Aries put it, a true trial by puncher. The Baumgart brothers, piloting their FIA spec Ford Rangers, also had good runs, finishing 6th and 9th overall, while Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer in another Ford Ranger brought it home in 12th overall. The NWM crew suffered a puncher in the qualifying race, which dropped them down the ranks for the main race. They were caught in the dust of the BMW X3 crew, Henny de Klerk and Adrian Roots, but managed to pass them eventually. Unfortunately, their Ford Ranger developed brake problems, which saw them lose even more time towards the end of the race. Speaking of de Klerk and Roots, the BMW pair drove a good race, though they too had to deal with more than their share of dust along the way. The BMW also developed engine problems during their first loop of the day, and even though it was fixed during the 20-minute compulsory service stop, the problem returned in loop 2. This caused major frustration for the Malalan Toyota crew of Johan and Werner Horn, who had no choice but to eat de Klerk's dust for most of the second loop. As a result, de Klerk and Roots finished in 7th, with the Malalan brothers in 8th place. Malcolm Koch and Johan Berger had a fair race with no major incidents. However, 3 flat tyres certainly put a damper on their result, and the pair finished 4th in Class T, 11th in the production category overall. And then there was Robin Yates and Gerard Skitter, who campaigned a Perma International Ford Ranger in Vryburg. The Aussie brought the Ford home in 14th place in the production category, a great result for him. So let's get confirmation of the top 5 in the production category then. Winning round 1 of the 2016 championship was Leroy Poulter, who came home in a time of 4 hours, 46 minutes and 57 seconds. Teammate Taylor was next, some 3 minutes 17 back. The gap to the first of the Class T vehicles was a massive 20 minutes and 57 seconds. But it was Fenter in third, a great result for the 4x4 Mega World crew. Van Staden was next and was followed home by Visser. Join us after the break for the details of the RFS Endurance race for special vehicles.
Be inspired, be motivated, be uplifted. Tune into Vuma 103 FM, KZN's fastest growing radio station for the best music, news, interviews and current affairs.
Let's make your day. Catch me, Jacinta Ngobese, every Monday to Friday from 9 all the way to 12. Brunch, where we talk about all things lifestyle, fashion, law, and everything that you need to know. So make sure you don't miss it for anything. Do join us.
Vuma 103 FM, KZN, be inspired.
Tonight on Highway Patrol, a driver calls for backup and the situation turns nasty.
Have you got a child seat in the car?
No, I haven't.
It's non-stop speeders out on the highway.
Give me that. 97. Never rains, it pours.
And what not to wear when you get stopped by the police.
I can smell bacon. It doesn't nice to see you beating up on cops.
At exactly 12 minutes past 11 o'clock on Friday, the 1st of April, the 2016 Donaldson Championship got underway for the special vehicle category. The date, however, presented no joke for multiple and defending champions Evan Hutchison and Donnie Stassen, who were first to drop the clutch in their Motorride Bat Spec 5. Hutchison's new teammates, the experienced duo of Quinton and Kali Sorwald, were the next to go into the qualifying race, followed by the intimidating Cobalt Striker of Jimmy Zahos and co-driver Zahir Bodania. Qualifying is a serious business, as the result of the 190-kilometre loop will determine starting positions for the remaining 488 kilometres to be tackled on day 2. And in a very dry northwest province, qualifying ahead of the dust is imperative for a good result. Someone who knows this all too well is former Dakar competitor Sorrel van Biljoen in the Atlas Copco Bat, who together with Philip Herselman was the 4th special vehicle competitor to tackle the qualifying race. In fact, no less than 21 bats, Zarcos, Porters, Acecos and CRTs that spread over the 2 national classes making up the special vehicle category of cross-country racing took to the starting order of the RFS endurance qualifying race in Vryburg. But it's how you arrive at the finish of the 190-kilometre loop that really matters. And exactly 1 hour, 46 minutes and 59 seconds from starting the qualifying race, Evan Hutchison crossed the finish line to claim yet another pole position. A number of people were expecting his new teammate and former champion Quinton Sorwald to be near the top of the results, and the same could be said for Jimmy Zahos. But Zahos picked up a puncher, dropping him down the field as a result. This left the door open for popular driver Keith McInerney with rally ace Greg Godrich in the navvy seat to rocket up the standings into a career-best second position after a long and demanding qualifying race. The final step of the qualifying race podium was still up for grabs, and Atlas Copco's Sorrel van Biljoen was happy to grab that position. But it was tight, as only 8 seconds separated him from the 4th place bat driven by the husband and wife team of Marius and Yolinda Fourie, with Sorwald only a further 3 seconds back. Behind the leading special vehicles, Swaziland's John Thompson, alongside navigator Marisa Matten, was happy to be first Class P vehicle across the line, a few minutes ahead of the hard-charging CRT of Willem de Tooy and Bertus Coussard. Here's confirmation then of Evan Hutchison's victory in the RFS endurance qualifying race, and an excellent second position by Keith McInerney. It was a close-run thing, with only 11 seconds separating Sorrel van Biljoen in 3rd, Marius Fourie in 4th, and Quinton Sorwald in 5th. First blood for Evan Hutchison at the RFS Endurance in Vryburg.
Yeah, it's been a good start to the weekend. We went out careful. It was a long-time trial. It's an endurance event, so I was being cautious. It was more important to have a good, solid time trial than to push too hard. But we seem to put our car in first position.
The qualifying race and all of its 190 kilometres was done and dusted, but the RFS Endurance is a race of over 700 kilometres, leaving nearly 500 or so to still be negotiated on race day. And what a race day it turned out to be. It all started just after 7:30 on Saturday morning when the flag dropped for the Motorride racing pair, Evan Hutchison and Donnie Stassen, as they tackled the first of the day's 2 loops. Qualifying results are carried over into the race, so it took a full 2 minutes and 45 seconds before Keith McInerney and Greg Godrich could start their chase. The drivers behind McInerney, however, had no such luxury, as Sorrel van Biljoen, Marius Fourie and Quinton Sorwald would quite literally be in each other's dust from the word go. And it didn't take long for the drama to start. At around 40 kilometers into the first of the two loops, husband and wife pairing Marius and Yulinda Fourie were still going strong behind the wheel of their PHB bat, but shortly after they disappeared off the radar and became one of the race's first victims. It was very nearly also the end of the road for McAnety when he got stuck after hitting a gate post at the 68-kilometer marker, allowing the Atlas Copco bat of Cyril van Biljon to go past and into second place overall. McAnety and Godrich got themselves unstuck but lost around 3 minutes. They were now firmly in the sights of former champions Quinton and Cully Sorwald, but the second Motorride bat received a 10-minute penalty for jumping the start, dropping them way down the order. And while some names dropped down the leaderboard, others grabbed the opportunity to recover from their less than successful qualifying races. One such crew was Zahos and Bodania, who moved up a number of positions behind the wheel of their Cobalt Striker, while Botswana-based driver Keith du Toit and navigator Robbie Coetzee did the same. At the front of the field, there were no issues to report from the Motorride bat of race leaders Evan Hutchison and Donnie Starson, who reached the 20-minute break at the DSP in Vryburg with the lead well intact. Van Biljon and McAnety had swapped positions and now occupied second and third respectively. After leaving the relative calm and safety of the DSP, just one more loop covering nearly 250 kilometers remained. 250 kilometers of dust, trees, sandy roads, but mostly dust, which would determine who would be the first winner of 2016. The Class P honours were also still up for grabs, and it was a ding-dong battle all the way through. The Zarco of John Thompson taking on the CRT of Willem du Toit. In the end though, du Toit was just a little too strong for Thompson when he beat him by a mere 12 seconds, and that after 700 kilometers of racing. We were now nearing the business end of proceedings with Australian driver Dave McShane and co-driver Leander Pienaar. The Aussie qualified 6th, but the Fox Racing Porter had no choice but to settle for 7th. And had it not been for the 10-minute penalty, the Sorwalds' return to the sport could have easily been better. 6 overall was still a good comeback though. There were still top place finishes up for grabs, and after qualifying all the way down in 10th, Keith du Toit was more than happy to claim 5th place overall after fighting his way through the field. But speaking of fighting your way through the field, no one did it better than Jimmy Zahos, the Cobalt Striker qualifying in an uncharacteristic low 9th place, but by the time they reached the end, Zahos was only the 4th person to see the checkers, missing out on the podium by just a few minutes. And this is what racing is all about, the fight for those coveted 3 podium positions. As the teams were nearing the end of the RFS Endurance, everyone had a clear idea of who would step onto the podium, but the question was, in what order would they do it? The Team McAnety bat of Keith McAnety and the Atlas Copco version of Cyril van Biljon were breathing down each other's necks all day. But during Loop 2, it was Van Biljon's turn to pick up a puncher, handing second place back to McAnety. The popular Botswana driver now had the finish line almost in sight, but less than 20 kilometers from the end, the car mysteriously grinded to an agonizing halt. He could do nothing but watch Van Biljon blast past and back into second position. As mysteriously as McAnety's problems appeared, so too did they disappear, allowing him to reach the end in a career-best 3rd position overall, while the big man, Van Biljon, crossed the finish line in another fantastic 2nd place. But this only meant one thing, and that was that the RFS Endurance in Vryburg was all about the Motorride bat of Evan Hutchison. The champions didn't put a foot wrong and increased their overnight lead of 2 minutes 45 seconds to a dominating 12 minutes at the end of the race. So here it is, proof of Hutchison's flag-to-flag victory on the RFS Endurance over Van Biljon, who took an excellent 2nd place. It was a career-best 3rd place finish for McAnety. Both Jimmy Zahos and Keith du Toit drove brilliantly to work their way into 4th and 5th respectively. With both races done and very much dusted, it was time for the deserving crews to spray the bubbly from the podium. In the production category, it was 4x4 Mega World's Jason Fenter and Vince van Alleman who climbed onto the 3rd step of the podium. Actually, it was just Van Alleman, as Jason had to leave early to attend a wedding. Even so, the burly navigator was ecstatic to be there.
Then we got to Amarok and then we were in front and we just kept it there.
They were also the highest placed crew in Class T. The 2nd step of the podium belonged to former champions Anthony Taylor and navigator Dennis Murphy in their Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux.
I must say I'm very happy, I'm pleased, and at least now we can go to the next event with a lot more confidence.
But in the end, it was defending champions Leroy Poulter and Rob Howie who again topped the standings in their FIA spec Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hilux.
Today we stayed out of the dust and we managed to get away and have a great win.
In the special vehicle category, it was also the defending champs that took the spoils. Evan Hutchison and navigator Donnie Stassen drove a faultless race in their Motorite bat to take a much-deserved opening round victory.
So we've had a nice clean run. It's super fast out there. The tricky section, we had about 60 k's to find our way through the bush. It was a little bit tricky without the track. We managed to keep it clean and get through there without losing too much time. So we've held position.
For Cyril van Biljoen and navigator Philip Herselman in the Atlas Copco bat, the RFS Endurance brought a handy points haul, and Big Cyril had every reason to be happy at the end.
So we ended up second, the Atlas Copco bat. Second, first race put us in a proper good position to attack for the rest of the year.
But maybe the drive of the entire event had to go to Keith McInerney and new navigator Greg Godrich in their bat. For McInerney, it was a first podium finish, and the man leaves us with some inspiring thoughts after the race.
So the team really did a good job, and it shows that we have got the pace, and once we have had the taste of the champagne, I'm sure we'll always want more.
That's it from round one of the Donaldson Championship. Next up is the first sprint race of the season, a high-speed romp across a landscape near the Free State town of Vryburg. This innovative single-day format will see the crews tackle a short course without the benefit of a qualifying race to determine start position. The sprint race takes place on the 7th of May, and since the route is just over an hour away from Johannesburg, you might as well come out and see the action up close. In the meantime, don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. All the cross-country action from the 2016 RFS Endurance in Vryburg was brought to you by Donaldson in association with Force Fuel, Ford, Toyota and Tire Rack.